Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The tension in Genoa City had reached a fever pitch, and the halls of the Abbot mansion felt heavier than ever, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath in anticipation of the storm that was about to unfold, the storm that would shake the lives of everyone who called this city home. Daniel, with a heart torn between hope and despair, paced back and forth in the grand living room, glancing repeatedly at the door that led to Phyllis's hospital room, each tick of the clock echoing like a drumbeat announcing an unavoidable fate, and though he tried to steel himself, every step brought him closer to the realization that time was slipping through his fingers, slipping faster than he could ever grasp, and he could feel the weight of the years, the mistakes, the regrets, the lost moments with the woman who had been a constant in his life despite the chaos she often brought with her. The mother whose love had been both shelter and storm in equal measure, Phyllis Summers, whose presence had always been larger than life, whose laughter could light up a room and whose temper could ignite fires in the hearts of even the most stoic. And now, as he finally approached the hospital door, he could hear the faint beeping of the machines, the rhythmic pulse that reminded him of the fragility of life, each sound amplifying the dread that had been gnawing at him for weeks, a dread he had tried to mask with jokes and bravado. A dread that finally found its voice as he stepped into the sterile, white room, his eyes immediately drawn to her bed, where Phyllis lay frail, pale, yet somehow still possessing that undeniable aura that had captivated everyone around her. And as Daniel knelt by her side, taking her hand into his, he felt the tremor of her grip, weak but still filled with a stubborn strength that had always been her hallmark, and she turned her gaze toward him, eyes glistening with unshed tears, reflecting both love and sorrow. A mirror of the bond they shared, bond forged in laughter and heartbreak, in secrets kept and revealed, and she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the machines, "Daniel." And he leaned closer, willing her to hold on, willing her to fight as he had done countless times before, clinging to the hope that this moment was not yet the end. But Phyllis shook her head ever so slightly, a sad smile gracing her lips, a smile tinged with resignation, and she continued, her words falling slowly, deliberately, carrying the weight of finality. "Always forgive me. I love you." And Daniel's world seemed to tilt on its axis as each word pierced him like a shard of glass, each syllable a dagger of grief and love intertwined, leaving him breathless, unable to comprehend the reality that these 6 words were all he would hear from her. 6 words that encapsulated a lifetime of connection, mistakes, redemption, and unconditional love. And as he held her frail hand to his cheek, tears spilling freely, blurring the stark white walls of the room into a haze of memory and emotion, he could feel the life ebbing from her. A soft sigh escaping her lips as the machines behind them seemed to mourn with a hollow beep, marking the end of an era. A chapter in the story of Genoa City that would forever be etched in the hearts of those who knew her. And Daniel's mind raced through countless moments. The times she had defended him when the world seemed against him. The times she had scolded him when he needed guidance. The times they had laughed together at absurdities and celebrated victories both big and small, all culminating in this heart-wrenching farewell, a farewell that carried the weight of years spent navigating a world of betrayals, alliances, heartbreak, and fleeting triumphs. And as Phyllis's eyes slowly closed for the final time, a profound silence filled the room, broken only by the sobs of a son whose love for his mother had never been stronger than in the moment of loss, a silence that echoed through the corridors of the Abbot mansion, spilling into the streets of Genoa City, touching the lives of everyone who had ever loved Phyllis Summers, leaving an indelible mark on the city, a reminder of the impermanence of life, the enduring power of love, and the devastating weight of final words. And Daniel, crumpled to the floor beside her bed, clutched her hand as if he could somehow tether her spirit to the world he so desperately wanted to share with her, his heart breaking in a rhythm that mirrored the emptiness he felt inside, the grief-stricken realization that nothing could ever replace her presence, her voice, her guidance, or her love. And in that room, with the hum of the machines fading into the background and the light of the setting sun casting a golden glow on the scene, Daniel whispered back the words he wished he could have said countless times, words of forgiveness, words of love, words of acknowledgement that he had never truly realized until now the depth of the bond they shared. And as he did, he felt an overwhelming sense of loss, a void that no amount of comfort, no amount of explanation could ever fill, and the city outside continued its relentless rhythm, oblivious to the heartbreak that had unfolded in that hospital room. But for Daniel, For those who had loved Phyllis Summers, the memory of her last 6 words, "Always forgive me. I love you," would linger forever, a haunting, beautiful, devastating echo of a mother's love and the son who would carry it in his heart for the rest of his days, shaping his decisions, his relationships, and the way he understood the fragile, fleeting nature of life and the irreplaceable power of love, leaving him, like the viewers of The Young and the Restless who had followed every twist, turn, betrayal and triumph, in tears, in awe, and in a state of reverent reflection over the life and legacy of a woman who had touched so many, whose departure marked not just the end of a character but the profound impact of a life fully lived. And as Daniel rose from his knees, still holding that hand that had guided him, admonished him, and loved him unconditionally, he looked out the window at the sprawling city, a city that had witnessed so much drama, so much heartbreak, and yet in that moment, he felt the full weight of loss and the enduring imprint of Phyllis Summers, her last words, a reminder that even in death, love perseveres, even in absence, memories sustain, and even in the quiet aftermath of tragedy, life carries forward, forever altered but profoundly enriched by the bonds we form and the love we share. Even as Daniel remained crumpled beside Phyllis's hospital bed, clutching her hand and feeling the weight of her absence, the world outside continued its ceaseless hum, unaware of the seismic shift that had just occurred in the lives of those closest to her, and memories began to flood Daniel's mind in waves, each one sharper, brighter, more piercing than the last, reminding him of the countless moments he had shared with his mother, moments that now seemed both painfully precious and unbearably fleeting. He recalled the early mornings when Phyllis would wake him with a tray of breakfast, coffee steaming and pancakes stacked high, the smell of syrup mingling with the perfume of her presence, a combination that had always anchored him in a sense of comfort and safety, and yet even in those small mundane moments, he could sense the larger-than-life persona she carried, the resilience that had propelled her through business battles, romantic entanglements, and family betrayals. And he remembered the evenings spent in her living room, the air thick with tension as she argued passionately over some decision at Newman Enterprises or some scheme concocted by Victor, her voice rising and falling like a tempest that left the room charged with electricity, a tempest that Daniel had sometimes feared and sometimes adored, and in those recollections, he could see the fire in her eyes, the determination that had defined her life, the moments when she had fought not just for herself but for the people she loved, for her children, for her friends, for the legacy of the Summers name, a legacy that now felt fragile, delicate, and incomplete without her guiding hand, a legacy that Daniel realized he had taken for granted, believing in her invincibility, assuming that no matter how many battles she faced, she would always emerge triumphant, and now, faced with the finality of her death, he felt the crushing weight of guilt, of regrets left unspoken, of apologies that had never been voiced, and he wondered if she had sensed his unspoken fears, if in those last moments she had somehow understood the depth of his love and the magnitude of his sorrow, knowing that all she could leave him were those 6 words that would forever haunt him, that would forever define the way he would remember her, that would forever shape the way he lived his life moving forward. And as he lay there, memories of Genoa City's long history of drama, betrayal, and fleeting triumphs came rushing back, reminding him of the complicated web of relationships in which he and his mother had been entangled, the rivalries that had burned between the Abbott, Newman, and Chancellor families, the alliances that had shifted like sand under the relentless tide of ambition and heartbreak, and he could see her standing tall amidst it all, the one constant in a city defined by change, a city where love and hatred often walked hand in hand, where friendships were tested, romances destroyed and reborn, and loyalties were always in question, yet she had endured, always enduring, always fighting, always loving, even when her methods had been questioned, even when her choices had drawn criticism, even when the world seemed poised against her. And now, in this sterile hospital room filled with the faint scent of antiseptic and the soft, rhythmic beeping of machines that marked the passage of time, Daniel could not escape the echo of her voice, could not forget the weight of those 6 words, each one a beacon of love and a dagger of sorrow, a reminder that life was fleeting, that every conversation, every touch, every shared laugh or tear mattered, and that even the strongest among us were not invincible. And as he wept, the door to the room opened and Jack Abbott stepped in, his face etched with the lines of worry, regret, and the kind of sorrow that only comes from knowing someone you love is slipping away before your eyes, and he stopped short, taking in the scene. Daniel on the floor, clutching Phyllis's hand, tears streaming down his face, the lifelessness in her features, the stillness of her body that contrasted so starkly with the force of her personality that had once dominated every room she entered. And Jack moved forward cautiously, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder, a silent gesture of support, of shared grief, of the acknowledgement that sometimes words could not suffice, and Daniel, his voice choked with sobs, whispered to Jack, recounting her final words, the 6 syllables that had pierced him, words that encapsulated a lifetime of love, apology, and devotion, and Jack felt his own heart tighten as he listened, knowing that in that moment all of Genoa City's scandals, schemes, and business rivalries paled in comparison to the raw, unfiltered pain of losing someone as vibrant, as unforgettable as Phyllis Summers. And as the two men sat there mourning together, Nikki Newman arrived, her heels clicking softly on the polished hospital floor, her usually confident posture shadowed by grief, and as she took in the scene, she moved to Daniel's side, enveloping him in an embrace, the kind of embrace that only a longtime friend, a confidant, and a fellow survivor of Genoa City's many storms could offer, and Daniel felt her presence, felt her warmth, felt the silent acknowledgement of the bond they all shared with Phyllis, a bond that was now fractured but not broken, a bond that would carry her memory forward through the lives of those she had touched. And even as the initial wave of grief threatened to overwhelm him, Daniel's mind wandered back to Phyllis's quirks, her humor, her sharp wit, the way she could turn a conversation into a battlefield or a celebration with equal ease, the way she had fiercely protected her children, her friends, her family, even when her methods had been flawed, even when her instincts had led her down rocky paths. And he recalled the small moments of tenderness that had defined their private world, the whispered reassurances, the hugs that had comforted him after a long day, the advice given with a knowing smile, and the countless times she had stood by him, offering strength when he had none, offering guidance when he was lost, offering love unconditionally, a love that transcended mistakes, betrayals, and misunderstandings, a love that had now crystallized in those last 6 words, a love that would haunt him, comfort him, and guide him for the rest of his days. And as he finally allowed himself to release the weight of his grief, to let the tears fall freely, he felt a strange mixture of sorrow and gratitude, grief and relief, knowing that her pain was over, that she had left the world with dignity and love, and that he had been there to witness, to honor, and to carry forward her legacy, even as the city continued its relentless rhythm outside, a rhythm that would never pause for grief but that would feel her absence in every corner, every conversation, every whispered rumor. And as Daniel, Jack, and Nikki sat together in the quiet aftermath, a shared understanding passed between them, an unspoken agreement that life must continue, that Phyllis's impact would linger in every decision, every act of kindness, every battle fought in the complex, ever-shifting landscape of Genoa City, and that the memory of her last 6 words would echo eternally, a beacon of love, a reminder of mortality, and a testament to the enduring power of connection, forgiveness, and unyielding devotion. And even as the sun set outside the hospital window, casting long shadows over the room, Daniel could almost hear her laughter, almost feel her presence, almost see her eyes glinting with mischief and wisdom, and he knew with a sorrowful certainty that life in Genoa City would never be the same again, that the ripple effects of her departure would touch everyone, and that even in death Phyllis Summers had left an indelible mark, her final words a guiding light, a lesson in love, and a sorrowful, beautiful echo that would never fade. As the news of Phyllis Summers' passing quietly seeped through the layers of Genoa City, word traveling from the Abbott mansion to the Newman estate and beyond like an invisible current that carried sorrow and shock, the city seemed to pause for a heartbeat, the usual bustle of corporate scheming, romantic entanglements, and whispered betrayals suspended in a collective hush, and in the private confines of the Chancellor estate Victoria, struggling to reconcile the enormity of the loss, sat in her office surrounded by stacks of legal files and photos that chronicled both triumphs and failures, each image of Phyllis smiling, laughing, or fighting fiercely in the boardroom a stark reminder that no one in Genoa City, no one in their circle, would ever be the same again. And as her fingers traced the edges of a photograph depicting her mother-in-law and Daniel, she felt an ache that went beyond familial duty, an ache that was raw, personal, and unrelenting, knowing that Daniel's grief mirrored the void she felt, a void that would ripple through her own life as she grappled with the sudden absence of a woman who had been a central force, a catalyst for both joy and chaos, a figure whose every action seemed to alter the delicate balance of relationships in the city. And across town, Kane Ashby received the news via a hurried phone call from a tearful Lily, who had insisted on sharing the heartbreak in her own fragile voice, the sound of her words shaking him as he absorbed the weight of the tragedy, and he found himself struggling to maintain composure, grappling with the fact that the woman who had often been the source of tension and drama in his life had also been a touchstone of honesty, of unpredictability, of vibrant life, and in that moment, he felt the duality of her impact, the pain of loss mingling with memories of heated arguments, sudden reconciliations, moments of laughter shared in the midst of chaos, and the undeniable realization that Phyllis's influence extended far beyond the confines of any single household, reaching into the lives of those who had loved her, fought with her, and ultimately learned from her indomitable spirit. Meanwhile, back in the Abbott mansion, Jack sat in silence beside Daniel, who continued to clutch the lifeless hand of his mother, their shared grief a tapestry of anguish, remembrance, and the bittersweet understanding that life was unrelenting and cruel in its timing. And Jack, always the strategist, always the one to consider next moves in the endless chessboard of Genoa City, found himself paralyzed, unable to formulate a plan, unable to grasp the reality that some battles could not be won, some losses could not be mitigated, and as he watched Daniel collapse into uncontrollable sobs, he felt a rare, piercing vulnerability, a humbling reminder that the fiercest warriors, the most resilient figures, could be undone by the sheer, undeniable force of love and grief, a force that no money, no influence, no power could buffer against. And Nikki, sitting beside them both, ran her fingers gently through Daniel's hair, murmuring words of comfort she herself barely believed, her own eyes glossy with tears, recalling in vivid flashes her history with Phyllis, the rivalry, the temporary alliances, the quiet moments of camaraderie amidst chaos, and realizing that the legacy Phyllis left behind was one of contradictions. Fiery, tempestuous, loving, manipulative, loyal, unpredictable, and unforgettable, a woman who had woven herself into the lives of everyone in her orbit in a way that no one else could. A woman whose absence would leave gaps that could never be filled, and whose last 6 words, always, forgive me, I love you, reverberated across the hearts of those who had known her, embedding a permanence that would linger long after the city resumed its frenetic rhythm. And as the afternoon turned to evening, the sun casting long shadows across the city skyline, whispers of the tragedy reached Sharon, who paused in the middle of a meeting with Mariah and Ray at Crimson Lights, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to process the enormity of the loss, feeling the threads of connection she had shared with Phyllis, sometimes tenuous, sometimes deep, always complicated, tighten into a knot of sorrow, and she realized that every secret, every conversation, every battle fought in the past weeks and months, even the betrayals and misunderstandings, seemed inconsequential in the face of mortality, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to weep alone, surrounded by the familiar warmth of the coffee shop that suddenly felt cold and indifferent. And as her tears fell, she thought of Daniel, of Jack, of Nikki, of Lily, Kane, Victoria, and the intricate web of lives that Phyllis had touched, and how the absence of one woman could so profoundly affect so many, leaving a void not just in the hearts of her family but in the very rhythm of Genoa City itself. Meanwhile, at Newman Enterprises, Victor stood at the window of his office, gazing out at the city below with an expression that masked grief with the usual armor of calculation and authority. Yet inside, he wrestled with a rare vulnerability, realizing that Phyllis's departure marked the end of a chapter not only in his corporate dealings but in his personal life, and that no amount of scheming, of power plays, or of boardroom victories could restore what had been lost, a realization that hit him harder as he reflected on the countless interactions, the alliances formed and broken, the moments when Phyllis's actions had influenced the outcome of business decisions and family disputes alike, and he recognized, in an uncomfortable moment of clarity, that she had been a force of nature, unpredictable, relentless, and unwavering in her pursuit of love, revenge, and redemption, and that her absence would leave an echo that no one could fill, a silence that would resonate in the corridors of power as well as the quiet corners of personal memory. And as night descended on Genoa City, casting long shadows that intertwined with the fading light of day, Daniel, still holding the hand of his mother, finally rose. Supported by Jack and Nikki, each of them feeling the weight of grief and responsibility, aware that the world outside would continue its unyielding course, that relationships would shift, alliances would form and dissolve, that love and betrayal would continue to dance their relentless waltz across the city, Yet knowing that Phyllis's presence, her memory, her impact, would forever remain a guiding force, a reminder of the strength, resilience, and complexity of a woman who had lived fully, loved fiercely, and departed leaving a legacy that no amount of time could diminish. And as they left the hospital room together, the city seemed both larger and emptier, filled with memories, shadows, and whispers of a life well lived, a love well shared, a sorrow profoundly felt, and in every heart that Phyllis had touched, from Daniel to Jack, Nikki to Victoria, Lily to Kane, Sharon to Mariah, her final 6 words continued to echo, an eternal testament to the power of forgiveness, love, and the enduring imprint of a woman whose life had defined an era in Genoa City, a woman whose story, though ending, would continue to shape every heartbeat, every decision, and every relationship in the city she had loved, challenged, and transformed with a brilliance that would never be forgotten.